Okay, this is what I was telling you about my Christmas growing up. And now into our, where the government decided that they're going to make settlements. The nomadic people, that was the end of our lives of nomadic people. We didn't go on the schooners anymore. We all stayed in one settlement. What the government settled was, they said, well, we're going to live like this. We're going to build houses for everybody. Well, that went on. That was strange to us, but we had to follow by the government laws, they say. Before then, we used to have our log houses wherever. Sometimes the largest people get together, or 5 families, which is away from Taka, 100 miles northeast. The people would get together, but this way, setting up settlements with the government, it was totally different way of life. We had to pay for gas, we had to pay for fuel, which we didn't. We were in the log houses or sod houses. If you think what a sod house is, stand-up logs. They stand it up, whichever how big a log house is going to be. Instead of laying the log house sideways, it's all up, all around. And they covered with the whole thing with sod. You get sod from the tundra. If you know what a sod is like, you know what you're picking at. But that's the way we lived. And in the log houses, we have wood stoves, or a big camping stove. If we didn't have any long time ago, that was before my time, however they made it, they always have pits. And their log houses were 2 floor levels. They had a pit, and they had no windows, but they used to go underneath a tunnel and make a long porch, and they got out, and that's how they used to have their log houses a long time ago, before my time, before my dad's time, which my dad was born 1913, so you could see what the difference between the government buildings and the Inuit buildings. Us with a log house, and them with their prefab houses. So people, you see that they have little difficulties when they come to start paying. We have to pay. They start saying yes, they have to pay the government. For what, they say? For our power. So that's different. Says we pay, otherwise if we don't have it, we don't have anything. We'll be in the dark, cold. And that's, to me, was different. But it was all, we were always adapting to new style of life as Inuvialuk. When the government come in and tell us, this is the way we're going to do it, this is the way we will live. Well, it was always the same old thing over and over. Our way of life was gone. A few of us know that I can count myself with the last borderline of my language. I can speak it fluently. None of us, my youngest people that live with, born, they don't know how to speak their language. They may say a few words as a dog, animals, but they can't carry on with a conversation like I do. When you do have your own language, it's very important. Now we're lost with our language unless something happened. Who knows? Might be different, might change. But it's just the way the life was. From my days, being nomadic into the way of government life, the way they want us to live. how else can you live? And sometimes when I think back, the last time I was wintered in Bailey Island was an old whaling station, but it was all gone. All the buildings were washed out from the ocean. We couldn't get across. So this is the way I remember it. We always had 10 frame, 10 by 12, and I dream about it a lot. 10 frame, wood stove, cooked wood stove. Spring comes, my dad would trap in the wintertime, make a living for us. Springtime, we all go into dog team, sled. My brother and I, we had our own team. My dad had his dog team. We all put our blankets, our grub, whatever we needed. We traveled for about 3-4 days till we reached our destination, which is my dad was trapping muskrats and beaver, and wait for geese to come in May. When May came along, latter part of April to middle of May, that's when the geese come in. Then we kill abundance of geese, maybe to 100 sometimes, 150. Mom and I would sit there and plug geese till we plucked them all and cinch the feathers and debone them, dry them, smoke them, and put them in what they call pulk seal. They flush it and they turn it inside out, and that's where you keep your meat. And the blubber in there, it rancid by itself. You don't keep it in the bright sunny day. You keep it in a dark place, and that way, that's what keeps your food from spoiling once it's smoked and put it into an oil. Or if you had wooden barrels, a lot of wooden barrels used to be around. It's come with the whalers. We put all our food that's smoked into those barrels. Never went without oil on it. We had to have oil, and that's what keeps it from spoiling. Otherwise, if you don't smoke it, it'll mold or get sour. That's what keeps from getting spoiled like that when you have blubber. From bearded seal, we used to rancid oil, so we keep our food for the winter or summer long and start all over again in the next spring. Meantime, our winter was always, every day if we can't, we always had to go hunt whatever we get. And up in the high Arctic called Banks Island, at the time I was growing up, used to be so many rabbits. You'd see about 200 in a herd. You wouldn't believe me, but it was the truth. You'd see it, just a whole white, just running, just like a carpet. It was all Arctic hare. But the last time I was up there, 1996, you could hardly see anything. The muskox from around the island was coming in from Melville Island into Banks Island, which would chase the caribous away to the eastern Arctic, even right to Labrador. The caribou would go off and muskox would come in. And what the muskox do, they don't eat like caribou, just top moss. And to eat that, they dig up the whole grass and kill everything what's on their way. And that's how they feed those muskox. But we had to look forward to for our caribous to come back, and it took, when we counted muskox that year, 96, it was about 85,000 muskox on Banks Island. I work with this anthropologist, her name was Mariel Nagy, and she counted out about 85,000 muskox. So can you imagine, in a little settlement, at night, the animals going through. At night, you could hear the caribous just scratching and just hoofing it up, and 24 hours sometimes we used to hear them non-stop traveling, just traveling east. But that was the last time that I was up there studying the caribous and the muskox with the lady that I work with. She was doing the oral history for Inuk. So you see, and besides, the government had to change our rules for animals, what we can kill and how many we can kill. And they had a quota in whatever we hunted, whatever we had to sell for our spending, our livelihood. Everything changed in our lives, so it's a very hard thing to do, but to adopt to another way of life. Sometimes it is better in a lot of education-wise, but other than that, you still hang on to the livelihood that you grew up with as nomadic person. So you see, when spring comes, you hitch up your dogs, so you're going for a long hike with the dogs. You could stay 2-3 weeks out on the coastline, hunting animals, preserving animals, bringing them home. So you're out there majority of the time till the snow and ice start melting, and enough time for us to start painting a schooner again, to get back on it for 2.5 months. So the routine is always the same, in and out, in and out. But nowadays, with these young people, life changes. Like I said, they learn. Some of them don't know how to hunt and trap. They're well educated, a lot of them, but it just seems to not interested in their culture anymore. And just for the older ones. Yet there's not too many. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe it'd be a lot better. I don't know. The way life is right now is totally different. These younger people, they have their own thoughts and minds. And they have hard time going down south to get well educated, like going to college, university. They always come in through middle of their education. Sometimes they say, I get homesick. They just break their year of education and they just go back home, and they don't want to hunt. And how are we going to make a living? It's hard to say. Maybe they have a way of life different than we did. But myself, I still remember my old culture way of life was Inuk. Inuk means an Eskimo. Inuk, real Eskimo. Inuk means singular, Inuk, one person. Plural, Inuit. Other than that, well, I wish Inuit would keep up with their way of life and their hunting, trapping. And that's how life, I remember knowing. Now that I'm this old age of 82, and my mother just passed away at 101 years of age. So you could see how young my mother was when she used to teach us. But one thing she says to me, when I was young, I used to pray to God. She says, I want to be 99. She kind of chuckled the last time I talked to her. She says, why did I wish for this? She says, now I'm 101. the last time I seen my mom. She passed on December 1st. She was a knowledgeable woman, very strong in her lifestyle. That's where she taught all of us, 11 of us. Out of 11, I'm the oldest. But she was a very strong person. On her side of life, Mom was a Gwich'in, now they called back in the days Denny. My grandmother was a full-blood Denny. But before my mother was born, or right after she was born, her dad, natural father, biological, her dad was drowned at Peel River. When she was about 3 years old, my grandfather came up to McPherson, and this Chief John Akay, Kikavichi, my grandmother's oldest brother, he was a chief all his life, asked my grandfather, would you marry my sister? And he was an Eskimo from the coast. He said, okay. I said, I'll marry your sister. So Mom she knew her Gwich'in language, which is Indian language. After they got married, kids usually pick up a language pretty fast. So what she did was she knew enough Inuvialuktun, and she learned Eskimo language, but she knew her Gwich'in very well. So whenever my grandmother wanted to talk to my grandfather, she would translate them into my grandfather's Inuvialuk, which is Gwich'in, and my grandfather would tell my mom what he wanted of my grandmother to do was in Inuvialuktun. She said she had to translate back and forth. And this is how she said after they got along, they learned their languages and Mom forgot. But she said this is how she remembered. How she used to translate the two different lifestyle of, different, being Indian and Eskimo. I wouldn't want to take that chance. I don't know, very hard life. But they got along so good. My grandfather went out on the coastline, bought a schooner from Peterson. He was a trader and a whaler, came in Herschel Island to buy a schooner that he bought. That's the one that we used to travel with. He bought it with 4 silver foxes. Silver fox at that time, one pelt was $500. And that's how he bought this schooner named Reindeer. So in the same token, I'm just going to make it short over how my dad bought a schooner named Beluga. It was in Aklavik, it was owned by Stringer Kiasuk. And Stan Peffer was a trader in Aklavik. So he got Stan Peffer to buy him. He was the middleman. And my mom said, don't buy that schooner. And my dad said, why? That schooner never been out on the coast where it's salt. In a salt ocean, if you have a schooner, it keeps it soaked and wet, so it's always it's safe water guard. For being in Delta boat, it's all clogged in with mud. Once it goes to the coastline, it washes off. The salt is very strong. And my dad wouldn't listen. It was latter part of 46, early 46, my dad bought this schooner named Beluga. Well, we wintered that fall, Booth Island. The ice couldn't make us travel. There was a whole schooners. Beside us was Khadiralik's family, old Paul Adam. Inuatuyak was the 2 families. Across a little lagoon was Fred Carpenter, and his mother married to Jim Ikalugaluk, Pokiak, and Bertram and his wife. My grandfather, shortly after my grandmother died, and with my two aunts. And across our bay there was another with the North Star and Reindeer and Beluga and Umingmak. That was the name of the schooners. And across the bay, like a triangle, there was another 3 families. There was Noelias, there was Angus and his family, their 2 brothers, and their in-laws, Radikliksak. There was another family. There's 3 families in 2 schooners, Nanualuk and Fox. When you get to the Portage, there was another 2 families. There was old Tamar, Amos Tamar, and his son-in-law. So they made 2 families. You go to the next Portage, was Fred Wilkes. That was the last ones. So can you imagine how many people were there all in on account of the ice? Then following next year, the same routine, we went to Banks Island. The ice came in too fast. We all wintered in Sachs Harbor. The spring came along and we were getting ready to go back to the mainland with our fur. This was the same schooner we had. That was 2nd year, named Beluga. There was just North Star and Beluga this time. My dad and brother-in-law was Fred Carpenter. But there was 2 families in our boat. There was my grandmother, Willie, Emma, and Moses Albert was our engineer. North Star was Pat Kivik, Bertram was the engineer, and Fred Carpenter owned the North Star. We started from Sachs Harbor, was nice weather. We got about almost halfway, we couldn't say, called, it's high fjords called Nelson Head. We got to the middle of the Arctic between the mainland and that Nelson Head, right smack in the middle of the ocean. It started blowing. North Star was ahead of us. My dad woke everybody up, said, "Get up, get up. The boat is leaking in real fast. The water's coming in." I put empty barrels all along. Around the outside I tied, and inside there's empty barrels. I said, the water keep coming. Maybe one of the planks came off. It's just coming in. Get the kids ready, the blankets, the fur, the dogs. And so we were just rocking and rolling. It was windy coming up so high and strong, and North Star came by. He made a circle once. On his 2nd circle, my dad grabbed on the close to the back of the pilot house. He grabbed North Star and told Willie, Moses, and there was Bertram and the rest of the boys. He said, "Okay, grab all the women and the children." They almost dropped my brother Frank. Just his boots came off, dropped it in. Said, "Okay, all the women and children in there." My dad, meantime, was holding the schooner North Star. I could see it once it hit, would be chipping. Beluga would be chipping now and then. After he got, "Now get the dogs moved to North Star." After kids and women and children and the blankets. "Now get the dogs moved. Move them to the schooner." So everything was moved in, and the fur, everything else, what we could. Necessities like pots and pans and that, didn't take all that. My dad was the last one to get on the board, and I was watching. The biggest rope I ever seen in my growing up days was huge rope. They tied it on a dead man behind North Star. And when I looked through the back, I was wondering, all I could see was a wave between the North Star of the pilot house in the back through the window, and I could see Beluga, just the top of the mast, that black part. That's how stormy it was, the waves. I have never forgot that. I always now and then dream of it. Pretty soon, I think I got tired by that time, wondering that Beluga was rocking back and forth, back and forth. You could see it. Pretty soon, a big noise, a big bang came along, and that rope, I think Fred Carpenter cut it because it was going to sink the North Star down. And that's the end of the rope, and that's the last time I seen that boat called Beluga. The waves were so high, and we finally made it to a cove called Bailey Island. And that's how I remembered that boat. It was scary. I don't know what we would have been. A lot of people drowned in that area. No way of being protected from the other boat or schooner or from somebody. But we always traveled, no matter what. The older people are wiser. They always never traveled alone.